In this episode of Crossing Perspectives, we'll be looking at when schools become targets, what school abduction means to Nigeria and Nigerians. Our guest today is Dr. Charles Usie. Charles, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
So, following my introduction, in your view, both as a parent and as a practitioner in this field, what do you think goes through the mind of an average northern parent when you drop off your child in school?
So it's two things. From my interaction and experience, there are actually two things that are going to the mind of parents. Actually, the first thought comes even before they drop off their child in school. And the first thought is it even worth it? Is it worth it? Then, at the point of dropping off their child in school, the question is, how safe is my child in school? And I hope my child will reap the benefit from it. Many parents are reluctant to even understand right now the value of education. Then when they cross that first delay, the second delay is dropping this child in school. Is my child going to be safe? Not safe for many things. Insecurity, health challenges, persecution, bullying, all of that presents. That is the mindset of an average.
And this is a region we're doing everything humanly possible to see if we can raise up school enrollment. But let's look at the time we had the Chibok issue.
Yes.
We thought it was one-off.
Yes.
But to you, how do you describe schools not being described as hunting ground? And to you, do you think, what moment in your practice the thought came to your mind that, see, this is a long walk?
Okay. I think for me, it's always been there. I grew up in northern Nigeria. And for many of us who grew up in northern Nigeria, I grew up in Plateau State. And this was, in the 80s. We grew up with a phenomenon at that time called the Metaseni. And these were believed to be a group of militia, predominantly in Sokoto, but ravaging northern Nigeria. I have lost count of the number of times where, as a child, now this is me, over 4 decades in Nigeria, as a child, so I'm talking about 40 years ago, I remember vividly how many times we ran away from school because they say Metaseni is coming, this militia group. And we will scamp out of school, children will go missing, teachers will go missing, we don't know what really happened, but we'll reconvene the next day. Because then the state would respond swiftly and provide reassurance. So the case we're talking about in Chibok, it's not the first case. It's not the first time children have been adopted.
Maybe social media amplified it now.
Social media won, and then the sheer number. I think for me, that was the one that really broke the camel's back. Yeah. That was the tipping point. But there have been instances where children have gone missing from school. 2 here, 3 here, 5 here, 10 there, but not in that scale. And then, of course, social media. Social media actually amplified the whole situation. I always tell young people that during our time where we were growing up, where there was no social media, if something happens in Ibadan, for us in Plateau State, before we will know, it will take a week, maybe when the national dailies would, read it. Then the story has gone cold, it's stale, and you don't get the full grasp of, the severity of the issue. So social media right now is active. As the situation is happening, you're actually amplifying it. And that, for me, I think is what made the Chibok saga, go viral.
I mean, growing up, I remember when we would watch NTA Sunday program where Frank Orize will always say, do you know where your child is?
Exactly.
Do you think we know the number of school kids that have been adopted in Nigeria? Do you know the statistics? Do you know the number of schools that have been attacked? Any chance you know the number?
No, we don't know. And even if through random sampling and through reportage, from both practitioners, I will be hesitant to put those figures on the table. Because in recent times, in Nigeria, once you give a number, the state, the authorities
will come after you.
And I wonder why, because then the question is, what is the interest? Is the interest in actually speaking the truth so that we can confront it? Or is it for the optics? Yeah. But the truth is, I don't have that kind of figure. And I think at this point in time, we shouldn't be fixated on the number. One child is enough. Just
Yes.
one child is enough. One child being kidnapped, one child, missing is enough, is enough catastrophe for us as a country. But yes, data is not readily available in Nigeria. And for many reasons. Because again, over the years, we have centralized everything in Nigeria. Everything in Nigeria now is about Abuja. Again, growing up, one of the most potent, and I say this, very decisively, one of the most potent arms of government is local government. I remember those days, during our time. And to be honest, I feel for this generation because they've lost something beautiful in this country. You will remember, my brother, that when we were growing up, one of the most important days in school is when local government school supervisors are visiting.
Exactly.
Everybody takes, dressing.
And Children's Day.
Children's Day. These are very localized activities. These are local government activities. In that sense, the true numbers that we should ever rely on going forward should be numbers that are aggregated by community and by local governments. It is only then we get the true picture. Because what would then happen is if every local government can account for their children, can account for their schools, then by simple mathematics, you can collate. Let's not make this thing more difficult and more complex than it is. And for me, that's my submission.
I mean,
we must go to a point where we hold local governments accountable rather than Abuja.
I mean, you're going into a deep area the state wouldn't want to talk about, because to discuss that, you're actually talking about the ineffective nature of the Nigerian state.
Yes.
A state that does not even know its population.
Yes.
But that takes me to the next question. When we hear about this kidnap, and then government refuse to discuss about the ransom, the money paid, of which we know that this is almost turned into a ransom economy. The kidnapping in KB State, we had the school kids were released. We didn't know how it happened. That of Niger, we had they were released. We didn't hear about what kind of agreement or settlement that happened between the bandits and the state. In your mind as a practitioner, and in your mind as a Nigerian, and in your mind as somebody who is well-read and understand the way most of these things play out, who do you think is profiting?
So, that's a very interesting question. Who is profiting from this?
Or do you think anybody's profiting?
I think some people are profiting. And the culprits in this instance are actually the perpetrators of this violence, which is I call them terrorists, I think the terrorists are the only, I won't say the only ones. I would say they are the biggest beneficiaries for now.
Yes.
Because ultimately, the ransom goes to them. And the question is, what do they use this money for? Because if you look at the sheer number of payments that have been made, running to billions of naira. Some accounts will even say, over the last 2 years, some accounts will argue that it's actually almost hitting $1 trillion. The question is, where is this money? Is there a separate economy that runs outside the Nigerian economy? Can these monies be considered to be part of the Nigerian economy? If it is, then the government is benefiting. If it is not, then the question is, where is this money? Where are they taking this money to? Could we now assume that maybe that's why the dollar is always beating the naira? Because if these nairas are being collated and exchanged, into foreign currency and exported out of this country, then maybe that's why our naira is losing value. So you can see there are so many permutations that can be made in terms of who benefits. Now, for every time you extend this conversation, the potential beneficiaries expand. So let's take the first scenario, that this money collated, even if you look at it only in terms of naira and in multiples of billions, then it means that if this money remains within the economy somehow, then it means, whether we like it or not, the state is benefiting from it. From the money being hosted in some formal or informal, financial institution, one way or the other. It means that somehow the money revolves within our economy. If you look at the other scenario of the fact that the money is aggregated and changed into, foreign currencies and, exported, then it means that the beneficiaries are also, in that sense, external. and we wonder what is the interest of some external parties trying to benefit from Nigerian economy. So the permutations are so many. The beneficiaries list are endless. For me, one of the most interesting things is who are the losers. It is poor, average Nigerians.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But again, just are you worried that we may have had last about the kidnapping in Kebbi, where it was alleged that the security, state security agents were pulled out few hours before the attack happened? And my question may be, two questions now. Do you think we're going to hear anything about that? One. The second one, where are our security officers with regards to mass adoption in Nigeria, especially with regards to school children?
So the first instance, in terms of the military being called a few minutes before the attack in Kebbi, I don't think we're going to ever hear anything else out of that. For many reasons, I don't know. We've never gotten feedback on any inquiry that the military, actually activates. A general was killed, in active service recently, around that same time, where, images of him in his last minute effort to survive, sent messages to base to say, I escaped, I'm here. And all of a sudden, the information reaching us in public space is that information, that intelligence was compromised, and the terrorists found him and killed him. And the military said they were going to investigate. Till today, we've not heard anything. This is just one out of several other cases where the military, the state, assured Nigerians that they were going to investigate to find out what really happened. And we never get to hear anything from it. So I'm not expecting any feedback from this. Then it takes us to the bigger question of where is the security forces in the case of mass adoption in Nigeria. I think there's a big problem. There's a big problem there, and we're not going to hear the last of it. It's not doomsday. I say this because of what I've seen in the field. I say this because of what I experienced. I've traveled to the length and breadth of northern Nigeria and even some parts of southern Nigeria. I am from southern Nigeria, from Delta State, and I was in Delta State a few months ago. And in most parts of our typical communities, we don't see any sense of security, presence in places that are obviously vulnerable. Majority of the schools we have in northern Nigeria have all the clear characteristics of vulnerability. One, schools are in excluded places. Two, the schools are not fenced. Three, the schools cohabit with insecurity pathways. And what do I mean by this? I say this because there are places that are considered to be hotspots because of their transit route nature. Mm-hmm. You will find schools in those places. You see, these are very common town planning, arrangements. Every society, every community should sit down and have a plan in terms of how they design their community. And when you do that, there are public infrastructure and facilities that you take account of and decide deliberately where they will be positioned. These things are not done arbitrarily. So why position a primary and secondary school in a location that is a pathway, is a gateway for terrorists and bandits? So you position a school that is a few kilometers to a forest. What do you expect? It's like planting corn and expecting to reap beans. So the way we even design our communities is a disaster. And that's why I say that unless we do something differently, this same issue we're having with mass adoption may continue, may. Because if we have made the mistake, let me say we have made the mistake of citing schools in places where they are not supposed to be, the question is, how do we buffer that with adequate security? Community policing. Because this is possible. Again, I always use my experience growing up in Nigeria so that it doesn't look like we're comparing apples for oranges. Yeah. So I won't be comparing where I've lived. I've lived in other parts of the world. I've lived in the UK and other parts of even Africa. I won't be comparing Nigeria with all those places. I will compare Nigeria with Nigeria. Growing up as a young boy in this country, in parts of Plateau State, in my community, if we see two people who are not part of our community, we know. It immediately sends triggers. And usually what happens is that the community structure immediately identifies these people and will begin to find out, why are you here? What brought you here? What's your business here? Not in the confrontational way, but what it therefore means is that our communities are so organized that if new people, strangers, visitors coming, the community knows.
Yeah.
So what is happening currently in our country?
Our social cohesion.
Our social cohesion is breaking down. Now, is it being broken down deliberately, or there's a calculated attempt to infiltrate communities and take over community structures? Those are the kind of conversations we should be having. Let's not be fixated on these one-off events, because if you look at the trend, you will see that something is shifting. And that is where my fear is. What is shifting is the ownership, legitimacy, and actual cohesion of our communities. It is shifting, we're losing it, and that is where the fear is.
So this may take me to the next question, which might be, do you think that this mass adoption, especially with regards to schools, have something to do with the issue of, I wanted to say Western education is evil, right? But if you permit me to say, is it a deliberate target on our education, right? To reverse the gains we've made in trying to improve school enrollment, especially with girl child. That's one. Two, I'm worried that the era of permanently shutting down schools may continue.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, these are really deep issues. These are deep issues. Let's take the first one. The case of the efforts we are making with school enrollment, particularly girl child, and if these issues have contributed to it. I think it's a chicken and egg question. From as far back as when I remember, even as a child growing up in Nigeria over 40 years ago, I knew that there were children who were still out of school at that time, for whatever reasons. And then the whole concept of education is evil or forbidding, the way, the terrorists.
Even in southern Nigeria, they are saying the education is scam.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, but then that's a different conversation.
Yes.
The conversation is different.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. In fact, let me put it in perspective. Yeah. So in northern Nigeria, you'll find as much as the recent statistics shows that as much as 88% of girls don't go to school. Mm-hmm. Right? It's more of the boys who go to school. That same statistics is almost reversed when you go to southern Nigeria, where we find as much as 66% of boys not going to school. Instead, the girls go to school.
Yeah.
So in Nigeria, in the north, the boys are mostly educated. In the south, the girls are mostly educated. Why? It's because of one, our ideology, our culture, religion. All of these factors play a role. So you can't find in the southern part of Nigeria, because the culture, the tradition, and the way life is structured there, the man is supposed to go out there and fend. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, historically, the people who have made it big time and who are more successful are mostly businessmen, not people who have really gone to school. In fact, in the South, when they taunt you if you're a professor, and they look at you and they pity you. In fact, they pity you if you're a teacher, if you're a professor, or if you work in corporate offices. They pity you because they look at you and they feel, oh, you're surviving on salary. Whereas a businessman will look at you and imagine that your annual salary is what he makes in 4 hours. And for them, that has influenced the way, men are. So the society expects men to behave. And so school is a second option, probably third or even fourth. The reverse is the case in the north. It's so intricately linked to our culture, our tradition,
belief system,
even our religion. And, so you cannot ascribe it to a more recent phenomenon of Boko Haram, as it were, or terrorists who say that education is a scam or Western education is evil, because that's a more recent phenomenon. These, dynamics that I've just created predates it.
But Charles, do you know we can actually link this thing to a functional state? That if we have an effective functional state that is working to its optimum level, it can start tackling most of these things, right? But again, I'm sure you will try to answer this, but I know the work you guys do in Plan International, especially the support you're providing, social cycle support you're providing for girls and schools. What do you think we should be doing with most of these rescued school children that are struggling after such, horrifying experience that they may have gone through when kidnapped?
Yeah, so this again is another interesting thing in terms of what do we do with children who have been rescued.
Yeah, because I'm worried if psychosocial support are provided for these kids, or they just show them in front of camera. They'll bring one teller. I do remember one teller that my mom would bring to sew abada and everything for us. They will sew dress for them the same day, take them to government house to have the best meal of their life, and then they will release them to their parents, chicana, and that is it.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I'm not aware of any structured, psychosocial support service. But that's where most NGOs come in. There are a lot of NGOs who are providing psychosocial support to children who have been affected by trauma in any form. Because the trauma we're talking about here is not just for the children who have been kidnapped. It's for those who were not also kidnapped. The trauma is there, knowing fully well that it could have been me.
Yes.
So the trauma, but how do you deal with that? Who will provide that kind of service for a school that has, a population of about 3,000 children, and then multiply that by their parents? Because their parents are also traumatized, both those who were kidnapped and both those who were not kidnapped. If you go to a school and kidnap and my child was there and my child was not kidnapped, the trauma lives with me, knowing fully well that it could have been my child. And then I don't sleep well at night. Then I look at my fellow parents and I wonder what they are going through. So it's a very complex system, and we don't have the support system in Nigeria. We don't have it. We always expect. That's why it beats my imagination that in some instances where the children were released, I don't know how these children find their way to Abuja to come and meet the president in the villa. For goodness sake, how is that even a priority? The support that should have been provided at that time should have been a localized support in their communities. In my opinion, those children should be taken, if at all we must do any government show and everything, should happen at the local government level, not even at the state level. Not even. Every time we do that, we break the system and the culture of community cohesion, leadership, and accountability at the lowest level. So when it comes to this kind of abduction and we're trying to create the optics, we go to the government house or we rush to the presidency. When it comes to election, that's when we hear that, or go to one of these local communities now and try to set up a business or try to engage in the social process. Then when they will tell you that, we have a community chairman, we have a local government chairman, we have a community leader, either one emir or one traditional leader. So where are these traditional leaders and local government chairmen where there is a kidnap? They take responsibility. Because when they do that, the state in all its full force are supposed to provide support to that structure, not the other way around. Every time you take away responsibility from local government chairmen, from traditional leaders at community level, every time you take away responsibility from them, you weaken their power, you weaken their resolve, you weaken their ability to take ownership, because these people actually know what is happening. There is no community I know in this country that you can walk in the way you are dressed, walk into any community in this country till today. Before you complete your rounds in that community, your information would have gotten to the head of the community.
Yes.
That somebody has come in dressed like this. So if they can track you, why can't they do that to the terrorists and the abductors? Or is it that they know, but they are powerless? And if they know, what do they do? Now, if they are powerless, what are the systems available for them to take ownership? Those are the conversations we need to have. And for me, as far as this issue of, trauma is concerned, until we provide the resources and the structures at local level to take responsibility for these children, we will only do so much. Now, for this particular question, permit me to give you a real-life example I dealt with some years ago. So some years ago, we got an account. We had to take responsibility for two girls. One of them was in the university I think in her second year, when she was kidnapped, she was going to school and she was kidnapped, somewhere in northern Nigeria. I don't want to be too specific so that I don't give any, So, but this is real life. When she was kidnapped, she was taken into the forest and she was with the terrorists for about 2 years. Yes, 2 years.
2 years?
So imagine the trauma for her parents, herself, her friends, her family, her school and everything. She was in the university. Do you know how she escaped? Or how we even found out? Having been in the terrorist den for over 2 years, she actually met a young girl who was about 11. And she became friends with this young girl. But this young girl couldn't speak English. And she started interrogating this young girl. How did they come here? The girl said she was born here. This is the only place you know. Who is your mother? She said she suspects that, she was pointing. She said, I suspect that's my mother. She said, do you know who your father is? He said, no. But that she has tried to ask the person who she perceived to be her mother, and they haven't given her any answers. And that's where the conversation started. And then this young girl was asking this older girl now, so where do you come from? What do you do? The girl said, I'm in school. This young girl said, what does school mean? She said, school is cool. Like, she was shocked. Like,
How do you even start explaining what is school?
And then this girl says, well, I don't know what school is because this forest is the only thing I've known. Since I've been born, this is where I only know. Apparently, this girl, her mother, whoever the mother is, was impregnated by the terrorists and she was given birth to in camp. And she's grown there. She's 11. So imagine how long that camp has existed. Now, this young girl tells this other girl, but I know this forest so well. I know how to walk out of this forest that nobody will know where we're going to. And this girl said, are you sure? She said, yes. It's okay, take me out. But the girl said, if I take you out, I don't know where to go to. I don't know anybody. The girl said, well, I know people. I have a home. I have family. If you take me out, you can come with me. And that's how this girl one day just said, okay, come, let's go. And they walked out of the forest and just walked into town. That's it. And then that's when this girl called for help. And then, of course, it got to me and everything. And that was the first time this young girl of 11 was seeing what a city looks like. She saw buildings for the first time. She saw other human beings. She saw cars. She saw phones. She saw things for the first time in her life. She's 11. The question is, what does the Nigerian state have for this kind of a girl?
Almost like the Amazon movies.
What does the Nigerian state have for this kind of a girl? I bet you that most social service departments in Nigeria, within the government, will be clueless on what to do with this girl. Anyway, to cut the long story short, we were able to provide support for the girl. As I speak to you, both of them have resumed back school and they are living their lives. That is the tragedy of the Nigerian state right now. Because this is one example. I can tell you there are hundreds of young children at different stages of dealing with this kind of trauma in their lives. Some have seen both parents killed. They were trafficked, brought back. Who is going to provide social support? Do we have people with the technical know-how of social support? Do you know what most times we prescribe as psychosocial support in Nigeria? It's religious counseling. And that's why even to today in Nigeria, you know that it's commonplace for Nigerians to actually agree that to say that my leg is broken than to say my heart is broken. Because emotional pain in Nigeria is most
It's not measured, eh?
And that's why even in the most advanced parts of Nigeria, the most educated and enlightened parts of Nigeria, where a husband and wife have a problem in the home and the man is battering his wife and the woman cries out for help, the first place people ascribe her to go to is her pastor. And most pastors are clueless how to deal with this. And then they begin to pray for her, for something that they could have a conversation with her and her husband. For some of the husbands, they are mentally displaced. They are mentally unbalanced, and you are praying. So we mix up some of these issues in terms of how we deal with social imbalance and what leads to what we call psychosocial support. It shows in different facets of our society. And to tell you that we don't really appreciate it as much as possible. Whereas in other places, that's why I hate to compare. But other societies have become so advanced that a young woman or a young man loses the cat, they provide psychosocial support to the person. Cat. I've seen cases where people lose their dogs and they provide psychosocial support to help the person deal with the trauma of losing a dog or a cat or a pet. That's how advanced other societies are.
Maybe because we are wired differently.
Yeah, so you see, that's the thing. We don't appreciate psychosocial trauma. We don't appreciate it much. And that's why many civil society organizations, NGOs, That's what they bring to the table. I know that there's a lot of question for people to say, what do NGOs do?
Yes.
It will beat your imagination to see the effort many NGOs, including Plan, will have a whole department for psychosocial support. We call it mental health and psychosocial support.
Yeah.
A whole department, a whole team of people trained with the right expertise to provide support. Then how many can we do? To what extent can we do this if the state does not take leadership?
I mean, there's one of your projects in Northeast that we did the monitoring and evaluation,
Exactly.
And it was partly part of the project to cover psychosocial support. While we're trying to put this podcast together, one of the issues the team, felt was very important, less discussed, but as we're doing our research, we found out that it was something we needed to speak to you on. Safe school initiatives.
Yeah.
After the issue of Chibok, I know people like Gordon Brown came up, a lot of known international world leaders, monies were contributed, structures were set up. So what happened? Why has it failed?
I wouldn't say it has failed. So Nigeria became a signatory to the Safe School Declaration sometime maybe just a little bit before 2020. But Nigeria hosted the first Safe School Declaration conference here in Nigeria in 2021. And it was, of course, the federal government, but in conjunction with its partners. And at that time, the partners were UNICEF, Save the Children International, and Plan International. The conference was held at the ECOWAS headquarters here in Nwokolo. I attended on behalf of Plan because we had to sign a contract and sign the MOU with the federal government to activate the Safe School Declaration. After that conference, which was an international conference, there were several countries who were in attendance and all of that. After that conference, the Nigerian government set up the Safe School Declaration working group. The Plan was a significant member of that. We met, we came up with the structures, because if you look at the global Safe School Declaration standard, it has 5 provisions that you need to achieve, for you to have safe schools for children. I'm not going into the details. This information is in public space, actually, but many Nigerians don't read. So, but it's in public space. An average Nigerian, just Google, you see the provisions. There are easy things that can be done. Things around infrastructure. Infrastructure would include water, fencing, buildings and all of that. Things like policy in terms of local ownership and security architecture in communities is there. It is a low-hanging fruit that the government can easily. So we started making effort. In fact, I remember the security forces were all part of the working group, and the combined security forces, NSCDC, army, military, all of them, everybody. So the formation was well structured. So you see why I would say it did not fail. So on the Safe School Initiative, which came about from the Safe School Declaration, which world leaders and countries came about a few years ago. In my opinion, in 2021, when the National Working Group was set up, it was well consummated. We had all the relevant partners there. We had all the key stakeholders in that group. We came up with an action plan. Plan was actively involved. In fact, Plan put resources. Plan International in Nigeria, Save the Children International, UNICEF Nigeria. We put resources into this process, hosting meetings, conducting workshops. We ran several high-level workshops for all the working group members to understand what it meant and how to activate it. We came up with a national working group. In my opinion, I think that's where we started slowing down. Now, what should have happened from there is that each state was now supposed to domesticate it.
Okay.
Each state was supposed to look at the national framework, the national work, and the plan of action, and domesticate it.
So that hasn't been done?
I can't think of any state that has completed the process.
Okay.
Several states have made efforts. I'm not sure. I need to be updated. At the state level, they should set up systems and structures to domesticate it in whatever form that applies to them. I'm not aware if any state has completed that process. I think what most states are doing is just implementing the national plan of action the way it is domiciled. And my issue with that, or the way I envisage it, is that each state is supposed to look at the national framework, look at the national plan of action, contextualize it to their own, context, and ask themselves, as a state, what do we want? This is about ambition. So as a state, what do you want for your people? What do you want for yourself? How do we protect our schools? How do we protect our students? How do we encourage students to remain in school with confidence that they are safe? And at that point, the state is supposed to set up their own structure with all the critical actors, with security agencies, with community leaders, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and come up with a plan and begin to implement it. At that level, it goes to local government. And at local government, they take account for their schools. They do the mapping, like I talked about. And when you do the mapping, you know where each school is. You assess each of the schools in terms of their vulnerability. And based on that, because the kind of support you will give to a school that is in an exterior part of the town will not be the same kind of support you will give to a school that is sitting next to the local government headquarters.
Yeah.
So that's why vulnerability assessment comes in. All of this is part of the provision. These are not rocket science procedures. These are things that should be done on a very calculated basis, carrying all the stakeholders along, and on the basis of that, fashion out a plan of action. And say, because these particular schools are in the periphery, they are in the outskirts, they are in vulnerable zones, and they are exposed, what we'll do is that we'll make more investments in them, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security support, in terms of allocations. That's why the current government, talking about local government autonomy, made sense at that time. Because this is the kind of thing the local government
should be doing. Yeah.
When they get the allocation, they're supposed to say, for education, this is what we will do. We will invest in our schools. The local authorities hold the local government chairman and his team to account to say these schools are more vulnerable. We'll give more allocations to them. And then you begin to put in the provisions. So the Safe School Declaration, in its concept and framing, it's an amazing concept. I think it's meant for places like Nigeria and, most part of sub-Saharan Africa, because you don't do Safe School Declaration in the UK.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it doesn't even make any sense there because their society is structured and organized differently. So that's where we are. Yeah. I think the concept, it's valid. It's
the implementation is a problem.
Implementation is a problem. So, and at state level.
Charles, I know the funding has really dried up.
Yeah.
Or the funding is not even there. Yeah. But I know your passion. Let me put you in the spot. Yeah. Is this something, the re-advocacy, if I'm allowed to use that term, is this something Plan might think about?
Yes.
I mean, Nextier can join you. Let's see if we can get in the states to see whether they can domesticate this.
Yes, I agree. And this is where and it's good you brought this up because we speak both as executives of our organizations, right? I'm the chief executive of Plan International here in Nigeria. So I'm the face and the legitimate authority of Plan International in Nigeria. So whatever I say here carries weight. And by authority, I speak on behalf of my organization. So education is one of our biggest agenda in Nigeria.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And I know you do that for Nextier as well.
Yes.
But that's the first instance. The second instance is that I don't just speak because I work for this organization. I speak as a concerned Nigeria. I speak because I have tested the best of Nigeria. I grew up in this country, in a place where we used to walk home from school. It takes me about 30 minutes.
30 minutes, 1 hour.
And it's, even in old age, to be honest, I pity the Gen Z. I pity them because I think they are not enjoying life.
Yes.
For me, some of those times are the best moments of my life.
Exactly, before you get home.
Before you get home. Oh my God. It was the best moments of our life. Where you walk with your friends on the streets. Do you know the interesting thing? Those days when we walk like that, the community protects us.
Exactly.
They protect us. If you see us on the road, you will see the way cars will be careful to drive. Cars don't overspeed. In fact, sometimes the traffic wardens, they protect us, they guide us, and then by the time you get into your specific community, you will find parents looking at you and telling you, how are you today? How was school today? I hope you're going back home. I hope everybody's interested in your welfare. It was some of the beautiful moments of our life. Even if those days, some of us became, you see, that's the beauty of the social cohesion we're talking about, because then, the interesting thing is that we knew the houses that were more favorable and more welcoming. It's a digression. But on your way home, as you're walking, you get to your friend's house, who is the first maybe in the community. And if the mother is a very caring person, you say, oh, welcome, how's school today? Okay, you're going home and greet come and just take water first. we go, we'll take water and
Not
water
only
is
not only water.
sometimes there's things to accompany it, and
And you wipe your mouth.
just wipe your mouth. You continue. You get to the next house, and then so usually the person who is last to get home is the most, is the biggest beneficiary. But that's to tell you how safe our society is. I mean, imagine what our children right now are growing up. There are children who today
We'll lock them up in
you
flats.
say lock them. There are children who go to school with convoy, with protection. It's a shame. In my children's school, I used to see some children who come with, funny enough, then it was related to some of the DSS people. DSS personnel with guns, submachine guns, guarding children coming to school. In my opinion, those children have lost a part of their childhood they will never recover. But then that brings us to the question of, what is my interest here? And I put two premises. One, as a chief executive of an organization that is set up, to do this kind of work. Plan International have existed for 89 years. In fact, next year we're celebrating our 90th anniversary, and we've existed in 84 countries. So I am not speaking from just work I have done over 2 decades in Nigeria. This is a history that we have, working across some of the most challenging environments in the world. We are bringing all of that to bear in Nigeria. Secondly, as a Nigerian. And on these two premises, I tell you that education is one of our biggest agenda in Nigeria. We do advocacy, we do support to policy and implementation, and we are one of the biggest implementers when it comes to education right now in Nigeria. I make bold to say this. Even if most of our work, is across northern Nigeria, there are states you go to in Nigeria. For almost, if you see 5 schools, one of them will be a planned building that we either renovated or built from scratch. I'm saying this with confidence. As of 2 years ago, the reports from my team show that we have built and renovated at least 580 schools in northern Nigeria. 580. That's not a child's play. That is investment from our donors and our supporters across the world. But now that brings us to the issue of advocacy.
Yes.
Because no matter how much money we spend in this country, Nigeria has the resources to do what it needs to do for our critical sectors like education. We have enough money. We are not rich, but the resources we have is enough to give us some level of stability. And that is why advocacy becomes necessary. If you look at the convoy of most of our governors, I tell you, for each car you see on that convoy,
It can rebuild.
It can rebuild and renovate and equip at least 3 or 4 schools in the community. So multiply it and you see what we're talking about, that we, in terms of the actual resources, we have it, but we are just misplaced in terms of our priority. And for next year, because of, I know the work you do, I think one of the biggest gaps we have, which I think you can feel very easily, that will make us even, our synergies work better, is the issue of data.
Yes.
We don't have enough data. And I think this is a gap next year can fill. What do I mean by data? Data in terms of number of schools, their levels of vulnerability, number of pupils, their attendance ratio, the needs, number of teachers. Those are data we need to be able to help government rethink the way it does its prioritization. So this is the last thing I'm going to say when it comes to how we support our education in Nigeria. Because most times the question is, do we have the resources? Now, I wouldn't say we're a rich country, no. Instead, I would say that the amount of money we have, whatever classification you want to give to us, we have enough money to fund our education. And I say this because of the practices we have. One, I've given an example, that the sheer luxury of especially our executive governors and their team, that alone can fund education in terms of their convoy, in terms of the largesse that is available for them in government houses and their travels and all of that. If we make a different prioritization to how we use resources, it can fund education. And the second thing and the final thing is the way we use resources to fund our personal religious ambition. And that has to do with pilgrimages. In my opinion, as a Christian or as a Muslim, if you want to pray and go on pilgrimage, go at your personal expense, not at our collective expense. There are two different things. You're going to pray in any of the holy cities is at your personal preference. It has nothing to do with our national agenda. And on that basis, we should not be using our national cake to fund personal ambitions. Now, I say this because if you look at the amount of money that is spent on pilgrimages, that can fund our education system. One of the poorest states in Nigeria, without mentioning any states, I think this is the point where Nigerians, everyone should go and use their tongue and count their teeth. Go to your state and check how you use resources. But one of the poorest states in Nigeria spent as much as 6.2 billion. And this was the data I got as far back as 3 years ago. 6.2 billion naira on pilgrimage every year. If you spend 6.2 billion on schools, there is no school in Nigeria, there is no state in Nigeria that has more than 2,000 primary schools. No. So imagine you spread 6.2 billion for, even if at the maximum you have 2,000 schools, you will be investing heavily in those schools, that in a 4-year period, we will not be having the same conversation that we're having. If you spend 6.2 billion on each school in your state every year, each school will have a basketball court, a volleyball court, a badminton court, a swimming pool, fence, water, lights, permanently. I say this confidently. And everybody...
Just, this might be the Nigeria of your dream.
This is the Nigeria of my dream. So that is why I lead Plan International in Nigeria. I could do this job anywhere in Zambia or in Uganda. I chose to come back to Nigeria to do this job because there's a personal ambition, there is a personal attachment, and I'm in Nigeria. I want to see this country different.
So this is my last question. Now, as a Nigerian parent, should I send my child back to school, especially if I live in states like Niger, Zamfara, Kaduna, Kano, and so on, the northern region? Should I send my child back to school?
That's a very dicey question. Again, my style of leadership, I will not give people instruction, I will give advice. And my advice is that, see, education is a gateway, it's a pathway. Any way you want to look at it. Every form of education, be it formal or informal, it's a gateway. It's a gateway, it's a rite of passage to a life of opportunities. If you think of it that way, as a parent, I will advise that you give your child enough options in life that they could use to become prosperous, to become a good person, and to contribute meaningfully to their lives and their society. And on the basis of that, I'll say education is one of that pathways. Education is one of those gateways to a prosperous life. And so, based on that, I think parents should know the kind of decisions they should make, no matter how difficult it is. Take the chance, take the gamble. Because what's the alternative? What's the alternative? The alternative is to keep your child at home. Doing what? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's the gamble.
Thank you, Charles. You know, if you allow me, we're going to be here for another 2 hours discussing. But it has been really an interesting one. I'm sure I'll host you again very soon.
I look forward to it. And very thanks to Nextier for inviting me. For Plan International, this is more than just a job. This is our life. This is what we do for children and for girls. And in partnership with Nextier, I think we can do more going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Like we say in Nextier, we're trying to build that society we all want to live in. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right.